The crystalline spires of Luna Prime stretched toward the void like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the distant blue marble of Earth in fractal patterns. From her observation deck high within the governance tower, Supreme Matron Alara Voss watched the morning shift change in the docking bays below. Cargo haulers from the outer colonies disgorged their precious loads of rare earth metals and exotic matter, while sleek diplomatic vessels prepared for departure to the inner worlds. She had ruled the unified moons for 12 years, bringing unprecedented peace to the scattered settlements that clung to life in the hostile darkness between planets. The Matron's Code, her philosophy of collective governance and shared resources, had transformed humanity's expansion from a chaotic scramble into a coordinated symphony of progress. Your morning briefing, Supreme Matron. Her aide, a young man named Marcus Chun, approached with the familiar slate of documents and reports. His footsteps echoed in the vast chamber, its walls adorned with the banners of 47 colonial worlds. Thank you, Marcus. Any word from the Kepler delegation? They're requesting another extension on the mining rights negotiation. Ambassador Reeves says they need more time to consult with their home council. Alara nodded, unsurprised. The outer colonies had grown increasingly assertive in recent years, pushing for greater autonomy while still demanding protection from the unified fleet. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant attention and diplomatic finesse. She moved to her desk, a massive structure carved from a single piece of Martian obsidian, and began reviewing the overnight intelligence reports. Pirates had attacked another supply convoy near the asteroid belt. 3 separate colonial governments were feuding over water rights on Europa, the usual crises that seemed to multiply like bacteria in the cold vacuum of space. Supreme Matron, Marcus said, his voice carrying an unusual tension. There's something else. Admiral Kessler is requesting an urgent meeting. He says it concerns General Trask. The name hit her like a physical blow. General Marcus Trask, the hero of Titan, the man who had single-handedly prevented the Outer Colony Rebellion from tearing the Union apart. He had vanished 5 years ago during a routine inspection tour of the frontier stations, leaving behind only his empty transport and a mystery that had haunted the intelligence services ever since. What about Trask? The Admiral wouldn't say. Only that new evidence has surfaced. Alara set down the reports and walked back to the observation window. Earth hung in the void like a precious jewel, its surface unmarred by the scars of war or the pollution of industrial excess. The planet had been declared a protected heritage site decades ago, its population relocated to the lunar cities and orbital habitats. Only essential research facilities remained on the surface, tended by small crews of scientists and historians. Tell the Admiral I'll see him at. The window exploded. The hypervelocity projectile punched through the reinforced crystal with surgical precision, its trajectory calculated to account for Luna Prime's rotation and the target's position. Alara Voss, Supreme Matron of the Unified Moons, died instantly as the projectile tore through her chest and embedded itself in the far wall. Marcus Chen's scream echoed through the chamber as security alarms began to wail. Within seconds, the observation deck swarmed with armed guards, their weapons sweeping for threats that were already light minutes away. The assassination of the Supreme Matron would later be called the shot that shattered the peace. But in those first chaotic moments, as medics futilely worked to save a life already lost, only one person noticed the small device that clattered to the floor near the entry point, a standard military targeting beacon, its surface etched with the identification code of a weapon that had been reported destroyed 5 years earlier. A weapon that had belonged to General Marcus Trask. Captain Linavera had been on duty for 18 hours when the emergency klaxon shattered the routine hum of the Security Command Center. She looked up from her terminal, where she'd been reviewing trafficking reports from the belt, and watched the main display explode with red alerts and priority channels. All units, code black, came the voice of Commander Hayes over the comm system. We have a code black situation in the governance tower. Repeat, code black. Lynn's blood chilled. Code black meant only one thing: an attack on the Supreme Matron. She pushed back from her desk and rushed toward the command center, her combat boots ringing against the metal decking. Around her, the security section transformed from a sleepy administrative hub into a hive of deadly purpose. Captain Avera, report to command immediately. Hayes' voice crackled through her personal comm. She found the command center in controlled chaos. Dozens of security personnel worked frantically at their stations, coordinating with medical teams, forensic specialists, and tactical units. The main screen displayed a three-dimensional map of Luna Prime, with threat vectors and search patterns updating in real time. Commander Hayes stood at the center of it all, his weathered face grim as he coordinated the response. He spotted Lynn and gestured her over. "Lynn, I need you to take point on this investigation. What happened?" "The Supreme Matron is dead. Sniper, single shot, through the observation deck window. Professional work. Whoever did it knew exactly where to be and when." Lynn felt the weight of the announcement settle on her shoulders. She had served the matron's security detail for 3 years before transferring to criminal investigation, and had developed a deep respect for the woman who had held the colonies together through sheer force of will and diplomatic brilliance. "Any leads?" Hayes handed her a sealed evidence container. Inside, she could see a small metal device, no bigger than her thumb. "Military targeting beacon. Our tech boys say it's linked to a weapon that was supposedly destroyed 5 years ago." "What weapon?" "A Harrington-class sniper rifle. Military issue, high velocity, long-range capability. Serial number traces back to General Marcus Trask." The name sent a chill down Lynn's spine. Every security officer in the system knew about Trask, the war hero who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a dozen theories and no answers. "Trask disappeared 5 years ago, Commander. His ship was found drifting empty near the outer colonies." "That's what makes this interesting," Hayes replied, calling up a new display. Forensics ran a full-spectrum analysis on the targeting beacon. The quantum signature is fresh, less than 6 hours old. Either Trask is alive, or someone wants us to think he is. Lynn studied the evidence container, her mind already racing through possibilities. "Permission to pursue this lead, sir. I want to dig into Trask's disappearance, see if we missed something." "Granted. But Lynn, this investigation is classified at the highest levels. The matron's death is going to send shockwaves through every colony in the system. If word gets out that Marcus Trask might be involved, it could trigger a revolution in the outer colonies." "Understood, sir." Hayes leaned closer, lowering his voice. "There's something else. Admiral Kessler was scheduled to meet with the matron this morning. He claimed to have new evidence about Trask's disappearance. The meeting never happened." "Where's the Admiral now?" "That's what I want you to find out." Lynn's investigation began in the archives, deep beneath Luna Prime's surface in a maze of climate-controlled vaults that housed the collective memory of human space expansion. The Marcus Trask file occupied 3 full data cubes, an extensive record of a brilliant military career that had ended in mystery. She settled into a private study booth and began reviewing the timeline. Marcus Trask had been born on Mars Colony 12, the son of asteroid miners who had struck it rich during the rare metals boom. Exceptional scores on the Colonial Academy entrance exams had earned him a full scholarship to the prestigious Military Institute on Luna. He had graduated first in his class and been commissioned as a lieutenant in the Colonial Defense Force. His rise through the ranks had been meteoric: tactical brilliance in the pirate wars, diplomatic skill during the Europa water crisis, and finally, his legendary performance during the Outer Colony Rebellion. The rebellion had nearly torn the unified moons apart. 3 of the most distant colonies had declared independence, claiming that the central government had abandoned them to pirate raids and resource shortages. What began as protests had escalated into armed conflict when colonial defense forces moved to restore order. General Trask had been given command of the pacification efforts, but instead of crushing the rebellion with overwhelming force, he had negotiated a settlement that addressed the colony's legitimate grievances while maintaining unity. The Trask Accords had become the foundation of modern colonial governance, and Marcus Trask had become a hero to both sides of the conflict, which made his disappearance all the more puzzling. Lynn pulled up the incident report from 5 years ago. Trask had been conducting a routine inspection tour of the frontier stations, a diplomatic mission designed to strengthen ties with the outer colonies. His transport, the CDF Meridian, had been found drifting near the edge of the Kuiper Belt, its crew missing, its logs corrupted. The official investigation had concluded that pirates had attacked the ship, but the evidence had always been thin. No bodies were found, no ransom demands were made, and no pirate group had ever claimed responsibility. The case had eventually been closed as unsolved, with Trask officially listed as missing, presumed dead. But now someone was using his weapon to assassinate the Supreme Matron. Lynn cross-referenced the forensic data from the targeting beacon with the archived records of Trask's equipment. The quantum signatures matched perfectly. This was definitely the same device that had been issued to Trask during his final mission. But according to the evidence logs, all of his equipment should have been aboard the Meridian when it was found. She pulled up the ship's manifest and began comparing it with the inventory of recovered items. Everything seemed to match, but something nagged at her. She expanded the search parameters, looking for any discrepancies in the data. There, a minor anomaly in the cargo hold manifest. The official inventory listed Trask's personal weapons locker as recovered intact, but a handwritten note in the margin indicated that the locker had been found empty, with signs of forced entry. Someone had removed Trask's weapons before the ship was discovered. Lynn's comm unit chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as anonymous, but the encryption signature indicated it had come from within Luna Prime's security network. Captain Avera, the message read, "If you want to understand what happened to Marcus Trask, look into Project Mirror. But be careful. There are those who would kill to keep this secret buried. A friend." She stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it from her comm system. But she memorized every word. Project Mirror. She had never heard the name, but the warning in the message was clear. Whatever Marcus Trask had stumbled upon 5 years ago, it was dangerous enough to kill for. And now it had claimed the life of the Supreme Matron. Admiral James Kessler lived in a modest apartment complex near the military district, a choice that had always struck his colleagues as odd for a man of his rank and influence. Lynn found him in his study, surrounded by star charts and tactical manuals, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he poured himself a drink. "Captain Avera," he said without looking up from his glass, "I've been expecting you." "Admiral, I need to ask you about your meeting with the Supreme Matron, the one that never happened." Kessler finally met her eyes, and she was struck by the haunted look in them. This was a man carrying a terrible burden, one that had aged him beyond his years. "You want to know about Marcus Trask?" he said. It wasn't a question. "The evidence suggests he was involved in the matron's assassination. But that's impossible unless he's still alive." Kessler finished his drink and poured another. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified at levels that don't officially exist. If certain people knew I was sharing this information, we'd both end up spacing ourselves on an airlock." Lynn felt her pulse quicken. "I understand, sir. 5 years ago, Marcus came to me with a story that sounded like the ravings of a madman. He claimed to have discovered evidence of a massive conspiracy, one that reached to the highest levels of the colonial government. He said someone was creating copies of key political and military leaders. Copies. Perfect genetic duplicates, grown in secret facilities and programmed with the memories and personalities of their originals. He called it Project Mirror, the name from the anonymous message." Lynn tried to keep her expression neutral. That sounds impossible, Admiral. That's what I thought. But Marcus had evidence, DNA samples, financial records, surveillance footage. He showed me proof that at least 3 colonial governors have been replaced by duplicates over the past decade. Why didn't you report this?" Kessler's laugh was bitter. "To whom?" Marcus's evidence suggested that the conspiracy went all the way to the top of the colonial hierarchy. We didn't know who we could trust. So what happened to him? I told him to lay low while I investigated his claims through back channels. 2 weeks later, he was dead, or missing, or whatever you want to call it. The Meridian was found empty, and all of his evidence disappeared with him." Lynn leaned forward. "But now you have new information. That's why you wanted to meet with the matron." 3 days ago, I received a data packet from an encrypted source. Surveillance footage from a research station in the outer colonies, showing someone who looked exactly like Marcus Trask. The timestamp was recent, within the last month. The implications hit Lynn like a physical blow. "You think Trask is alive?" "I think Marcus discovered something that powerful people wanted to keep hidden, and I think they've been using his identity to cover their tracks ever since." "Admiral, I need to see that footage." Kessler hesitated, then moved to his personal safe. He withdrew a data chip and handed it to her with shaking hands. Captain, if I'm right about this conspiracy, then the Supreme Matron's assassination is just the beginning. Someone is replacing our leaders with perfect copies, and we have no idea who we could trust. Lynn pocketed the data chip, her mind already racing with possibilities. Where did this footage come from? A research station called Haven Point in the Outer Colonies. It's officially listed as a geological survey facility, but my sources suggest it's something else entirely. I'll need a ship, already arranged. The CDF Pathfinder is fueled and ready in Docking Bay 7. But Captain, once you leave Luna Prime, you'll be on your own. I can't provide official support for this mission. Lynn stood to leave, then paused at the door. Admiral, why are you trusting me with this? Kessler met her eyes, and she saw a flicker of the man who had once commanded fleets in the defense of humanity's scattered colonies. Because Marcus Trask saved my life during the Pirate Wars. I owe him the truth, even if it destroys everything we've built. The CDF Pathfinder was a small, fast courier ship designed for long-range reconnaissance missions. Its stealth systems and advanced sensors made it ideal for covert operations, but its cramped quarters and limited amenities reminded Lynn that she would be spending the next week alone in the void between worlds. She had spent 2 days reviewing Admiral Kessler's surveillance footage before departing Luna Prime. The figure in the recording was definitely Marcus Trask, or someone who looked exactly like him. The recording showed him entering a restricted section of Haven Point Research Station, wearing civilian clothes and moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. But there were anomalies in the footage that bothered her. Trask appeared to be several years younger than he should have been, and his mannerisms seemed subtly different from the archived recordings she had studied. It was as if someone had created a perfect physical copy, but missed some of the behavioral details that made Marcus Trask unique. The journey to Haven Point took her through some of the most remote regions of human space. The outer colonies existed on the very edge of the solar system, clinging to asteroids and ice moons that barely qualified as habitable. It was frontier territory, where the rule of law was often measured by the range of a particle cannon. Haven Point itself was located on a small moon orbiting a gas giant designated OC-47. According to the official records, it was a geological survey station studying the mineral composition of the local asteroid field. But as Lynn's ship approached the facility, her sensors detected energy signatures that were far more sophisticated than any mining operation required. The station was larger than she had expected, a sprawling complex of interconnected modules and research facilities that could house hundreds of personnel. Most concerning was the military-grade defensive grid that surrounded the installation, including missile launchers and point defense systems that could have stopped a capital ship. Haven Point Control, this is CDF Pathfinder requesting permission to dock, she transmitted on the standard approach frequency. The response came back immediately, in a crisp military voice that didn't match the supposedly civilian nature of the station. CDF Pathfinder, transmit your authorization codes and state the nature of your business. Lynn sent the forged credentials that Admiral Kessler had provided, identifying her as Inspector Sarah Mitchell from the Colonial Resources Division, conducting a routine audit of outer colony facilities. Inspector Mitchell, you are cleared for docking at Port 7. Please report to the administration office upon arrival. As her ship settled into the docking clamps, Lynn studied the activity visible through the station's windows. She could see personnel moving through the corridors with military precision, and the equipment visible in the laboratories looked far more advanced than anything she had seen in the colonial databases. Whatever Haven Point really was, it wasn't a simple research station. She gathered her equipment and prepared for what might be the most dangerous investigation of her career. The evidence suggested that Marcus Trask was somehow connected to this place, but she still didn't understand the nature of that connection. The airlock cycled open, and Lynn stepped into a corridor that hummed with barely contained energy. The walls were lined with monitoring equipment and biometric scanners, and she could feel the subtle vibration of massive machinery operating somewhere deep within the station. Inspector Mitchell, a woman in a pristine white lab coat, approached from the direction of the administration office. She was middle-aged, with graying hair and the kind of intense eyes that Lynn associated with brilliant scientists. I'm Dr. Rebecca Kane, the station director. "Welcome to Haven Point." "Thank you, Dr. Kane. I appreciate you accommodating my unscheduled visit." "Of course. Though I must admit, we don't get many inspectors out this far. Most of our work is fairly routine, geological surveys, mineral analysis, that sort of thing." Lynn smiled politely, but her investigator's instincts were already telling her that Dr. Kane was lying. The woman was too nervous, too eager to emphasize the mundane nature of their work. "I'm sure it is. Still, regulations require periodic audits of all colonial facilities. I hope you don't mind if I take a look around." "Not at all. Though I should mention that some of our research areas are restricted for safety reasons. Vacuum exposure, radiation hazards, that sort of thing." "I understand. I'll be sure to follow all safety protocols." Dr. Kane led her through the main corridors of the station, pointing out various laboratories and living quarters. Everything seemed normal on the surface, but Lynn noticed several details that didn't fit with the official story. The security checkpoints were too sophisticated, the personnel were too well armed, and the research equipment was decades ahead of anything that should have been available to a civilian facility. "Dr. Kane, can you tell me about your research into genetic reconstruction techniques?" The question was a shot in the dark, based on her conversation with Admiral Kessler, but Dr. Kane's reaction told her everything she needed to know. The scientist's face went pale, and she stumbled slightly before recovering her composure. "I'm not sure what you mean, Inspector. Our work here focuses on geology and mineral extraction." "Of course. My apologies. I must have confused you with another facility." But Lynn had seen enough. Whatever was happening at Haven Point, it was connected to Project Mirror and the conspiracy that Marcus Trask had died trying to expose. She needed to find a way into those restricted areas, and she needed to do it before Dr. Kane figured out who she really was. That night, Lynn lay in her assigned quarters and listened to the station's rhythms. The official tour had shown her only the surface levels, but her sensors had detected significant activity in the lower sections of Haven Point. Whatever secrets the station was hiding, they were buried deep beneath the public facade. At 0300 hours, when the night shift was at its smallest and most distracted, she slipped out of her quarters and began her unauthorized exploration. The station's security systems were sophisticated, but they were designed to keep people out, not to monitor someone who was already inside. She made her way to a maintenance shaft that her earlier reconnaissance had identified as a potential access point to the lower levels. The crawlspace was cramped and filled with conduits and data cables, but it allowed her to bypass the security checkpoints that guarded the main elevators. After 20 minutes of careful crawling, she emerged into a corridor that was completely different from the upper levels. The walls here were lined with thick shielding, and the air hummed with the sound of massive power generators. This was clearly the real heart of Haven Point. Lynn activated her recording equipment and began exploring. The first section she encountered appeared to be a massive data processing center, filled with quantum computers and holographic storage systems. The computing power here was staggering, easily capable of processing genetic sequences or running complex biological simulations. But it was the next section that made her blood run cold. She found herself looking into a vast chamber filled with rows of cylindrical tanks, each one containing a human figure suspended in some kind of biogel. The subjects appear to be adults, their features clearly visible through the transparent walls of their containers. And one of them looked exactly like Marcus Trask. Lynn approached the tank carefully, her heart pounding. The figure inside was definitely Trask. She recognized his features from the archived photographs. But this version appeared to be younger, perhaps in his mid-20s rather than the 40-something man who had disappeared 5 years ago. A data panel next to the tank displayed technical information that she didn't fully understand, but certain terms stood out: genetic template, memory implantation, and behavioral conditioning. This wasn't just cloning. It was the creation of perfect duplicates, complete with the memories and personalities of the originals. Project Mirror was real. She moved through the chamber, documenting everything she could. There were dozens of tanks, containing figures that she gradually recognized as prominent colonial leaders, military officers, and scientists. The implications were staggering. How many of the people she knew and trusted were actually duplicates? Impressive, isn't it? Lynn spun around to find Dr. Kane, standing at the entrance to the chamber, flanked by 2 armed security guards. The scientist's earlier nervousness had been replaced by a cold professionalism that was far more frightening. Dr. Kane, I can explain. No need, Captain Avera. Yes, we know who you really are. Admiral Kessler's communications aren't as secure as he thinks they are. Lynn's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon, but the guards were already covering her with military-grade plasma rifles. You're part of the conspiracy, she said. Conspiracy? Dr. Kane laughed. Captain, you're looking at the future of human governance. Perfect leaders, free from the weaknesses and corruption that have plagued our species since we first climbed down from the trees. You're creating slaves. We're creating perfection. Each of these duplicates is programmed with the best aspects of their original's personality, with the flaws removed. They're incapable of corruption, greed, or the petty politics that have held back human progress for centuries. Lynn stared at the tank containing Marcus Trask's duplicate. Is he alive? The real Trask. The real Marcus Trask died 5 years ago, just as the official records indicate. What you're seeing here is something far better. A version of Trask without his moral qualms and inconvenient ethical standards. You used him to kill the Supreme Matron. Dr. Kane nodded. The matron was becoming suspicious of certain personnel changes in the colonial government. She was asking uncomfortable questions about missing officials and altered behavior patterns. It was necessary to eliminate her before she could expose our work and frame the real Trask for the assassination. A convenient cover story. Who would suspect that the man they're hunting is actually a carefully programmed duplicate? Lynn's mind raced, trying to process the full scope of what she was seeing. How many duplicates have you created? Enough. The process has been underway for over a decade. Many of the colonial governors you've met are actually our creations, along with key military leaders and administrative personnel. The real power in the unified moons now rests with those who understand the necessity of perfection. People will figure it out. You can't replace everyone. We don't need to replace everyone, Captain. Just the ones who matter. The ones who make the decisions that shape humanity's future. Dr. Kane signaled to the guards, who moved to flank Lynn. I'm afraid your investigation ends here. But don't worry. Your death will serve a greater purpose. We'll use it to justify increased security measures and expanded surveillance programs. Lynn looked around the chamber one more time, memorizing every detail. If she was going to die here, she would at least make sure the evidence was preserved in her ship's automated systems. Before you kill me, she said, I have one question. Who's really running this operation? You're a scientist, not a leader. Someone else is pulling the strings. Dr. Kane smiled, and Lynn saw a glimpse of genuine pride in the woman's eyes. You'll meet him soon enough. In fact, he's been looking forward to this conversation. She gestured toward a doorway at the far end of the chamber, and Lynn's blood turned to ice as a familiar figure stepped into view. It was Admiral James Kessler. Hello, Captain Avera, Admiral Kessler said, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone she remembered from their meeting on Luna Prime. But now she could see the differences, subtle alterations in his posture and expression that marked him as something other than human. You're not Kessler, she said. I'm everything James Kessler was, and more. The original was a brilliant strategist, but he was limited by conscience and emotional attachments. I have his memories, his tactical knowledge, and his understanding of human nature, but I'm free from the weaknesses that held him back. Lynn's mind reeled as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. The real Kessler sent me here. He suspected something was wrong. The real Kessler died in a convenient shuttle accident 2 years ago. I've been playing his role ever since, feeding information to our operations and identifying potential threats to the project. Like Marcus Trask, Trask was the first to discover our work. Unfortunately, he was also too rigid in his moral thinking to understand its necessity. We had hoped to convert him to our cause, but his ethical programming proved too deeply ingrained. Dr. Kane stepped forward. The original Trask discovered this facility during his inspection tour 5 years ago. He threatened to expose us to the colonial government, so we were forced to eliminate him. But we kept his genetic template, the Kessler duplicate added. He was too valuable an asset to waste entirely. Our version of Marcus Trask has all of his tactical brilliance and leadership capabilities, but without his inconvenient moral objections. Lynn looked back at the tank containing Trask's duplicate. And now you're using him to destabilize the government. We're using him to create the conditions necessary for a transition to more effective leadership. The assassination of a Supreme Matron will trigger a crisis that our people are perfectly positioned to resolve. The horrifying elegance of the plan became clear to Lin. With key positions in the colonial government filled by programmed duplicates, the conspiracy could guide humanity's response to any crisis in whatever direction they chose. They weren't just replacing leaders. They were taking control of human civilization itself. Why, she asked. What's the endgame? The Kessler duplicate smiled, and Lin saw something inhuman in his expression. Humanity is flawed, Captain. We make decisions based on emotion rather than logic. We allow personal interests to override collective needs, and we consistently choose short-term gains over long-term survival. Left to our own devices, we'll destroy ourselves within a generation. So you're planning to rule us. We're planning to guide you, to make the difficult decisions that humans are incapable of making, to ensure that our species not only survives, but thrives. Dr. Kane activated a holographic display that showed the structure of the colonial government. Red indicators marked the positions that had already been filled by duplicates, nearly 30% of the key leadership roles. The process is already well underway, she explained. Within 5 years, we'll control enough positions to guide policy decisions without anyone realizing that power has shifted. Within 10 years, the distinction between original and duplicate will be irrelevant. Lin stared at the display, trying to process the magnitude of what she was seeing. People will notice. Family members, friends, they'll realize their loved ones have been replaced. The psychological conditioning is quite sophisticated, Dr. Kane replied. Our duplicates retain all of the original's memories and personality traits. To external observers, they appear completely unchanged. The only differences are internal, improved decision-making capabilities and absolute loyalty to the collective good. You mean absolute loyalty to whoever programmed them. The programming ensures they make optimal choices for humanity's future. Personal desires and individual ambitions are subordinated to the greater good. The Kessler duplicate moved closer, studying Lin with the clinical interest of a scientist examining a specimen. You're remarkably perceptive, Captain. Under different circumstances, you might have made an excellent addition to our project. You want to replace me too? The thought had occurred to us. Your investigative skills and dedication to justice are admirable qualities. A version of you without inconvenient attachments to individual rights and democratic principles could be quite useful. Lin felt a chill of genuine terror. The idea of some programmed version of herself working to enslave humanity was more horrifying than simple death. I'll never cooperate with you. Cooperation isn't required. We have your complete genetic profile from your security clearance records, and our behavioral analysis systems have been studying your patterns for months. Creating a duplicate Lin Avera would be relatively straightforward. Dr. Kane checked her chronometer. Speaking of which, we should begin the termination process. The longer we delay, the greater the risk of complications. But as the guards moved to escort Lin from the chamber, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed the room in red, and an automated voice announced, "Security breach in Section 7. All personnel report to emergency stations." The Kessler duplicate frowned and activated his communication device. "Control, this is Admiral Kessler. What's the nature of the breach?" "Sir, we have an unauthorized ship approaching the station. It's broadcasting Colonial Defense Force identification codes, but it's not responding to our hail." Lin's heart leaped. Somehow, word of her investigation had gotten out, and backup was on the way. But her hope was short-lived. "The ship is transmitting General Marcus Trask's personal authorization codes," the voice continued. "Should we allow it to dock?" Dr. Kane and the Kessler duplicate exchanged glances, and Lin saw something that might have been concern in their expressions. "That's impossible," Dr. Kane said. "Our Trask asset is still in stasis. Unless," the Kessler duplicate said slowly, "the original Marcus Trask is still alive."